Before you're seated this morning, turn and ask somebody the question, how much faith do we need?
How much faith do we need?
Do we need? You may be seated. It was either that or have you say, mulberry trees don't grow much in the sea. A few years ago, I wish Effie were here this morning, our master gardener. But a few years ago, Nancy and I planted, we went out and purchased a passion vine and planted it in our backyard. And passion vines, as you may know, are great sources of food for caterpillars that are going to turn into butterflies. And so we bought the passion vine with the intent that the caterpillars have a source of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Actually, they don't even stop. They're just eating machines. They eat all the time, and we would always be able to turn over leaves and see caterpillars growing on them. And in fact, our yard was always full of butterflies. It's a sad thing that we seem to have fewer and fewer butterflies these days, and that's something we should all be concerned about. And even though we were happy to see the caterpillars eating the vines, those same caterpillars, because they're so voracious, would just decimate the vines. You know, they would just, you'd see some new leaves coming, and before you could even get them to full size, they were being chowed down on and gone. And then sometimes it'd just be the stems, and they'd even go ahead and eat the stems. But lately we found out that the vines are actually preparing for a takeover of our backyard. We started with one, and now we have 4 that have planted themselves. And then there are several others in our lawn that I mow down every week because, it's enough already. 4 of these plants growing, beautiful flowers on them, lots of leaves, they're strong, and they're healthy. A while back, I thought, let me move 2 of them that were growing in the lawn and put them in an actual flower bed. That's where they're supposed to be. And put some stakes, so I very carefully dug them up and moved them, placed them into the flower bed, watered them and cared for them. And within a week, both of these strong plants had utterly died. They no longer survived. They didn't make it. And now I'm reading that if I had faith, they might have replanted themselves in the lake behind our yard at the edge of our property, all by themselves at my prayerful direction to them. And they would be thriving even. In fact, if that worked, all my gardening woes would be over. I wouldn't have to worry about the trees that we have planted that are beginning to get too big and need to be spaced out. I could just go into the backyard and pray and meditate, go on my knees and tell God where all those plants need to go. And they just place themselves exactly where they needed to be in our garden and exactly where I want them to be. But you know what the truth of the matter is? I don't have that kind of faith. I don't have the kind of faith that would tell those passion vines to pick up and move, let alone ask our mango and our lemon tree to find a new place for them to grow and to go on. In fact, I think it would be a severe misappropriation of faith to suggest that this is what we should do and that this would be helpful. And so then we might ask ourselves, what is it that Jesus is getting at? In our gospel texts and in the weeks going past, if you look back into the Gospel of Luke, Jesus seems to be asking his disciples, also called his apostles, he seems to be asking them for all kinds of things. He asks them to give up their possessions. He asks them to leave behind their families, even to the point we heard that if you do not hate your mother and your father and your sisters and your brothers and your wife and husbands and children and all, if you don't hate them, you're not worthy of the kingdom. He asks us to take up the cross. And as he's headed to Jerusalem, we today know all too well what that entails. He's telling his disciples and apostles to leave everything behind. And if you notice that today's gospel started in the 5th verse of chapter 17, you might stop and ask yourself what happened in the first 4 verses, because last week we were in 16, so what's going on there? In those first few verses, Jesus is telling his disciples, if someone does something wrong against you, you should forgive them up to 7 times a day. And that means yesterday and today another 7, right? And tomorrow maybe another 7. Any of you feel like you got enough faith for that? It would take some faith. And so the disciples look at that situation, they're putting it all together, all the things that Jesus is asking them for, and he says, they say together, Lord, increase our faith. You'd think that Jesus would be happy with that, right? I mean, here the disciples are following him and they're trying to get it right, and so they ask to increase our faith, and instead Jesus gets kind of a little testy with them, huh? He says, if you had even a speck of faith, if somebody says to me, if I only had a speck of faith, it sounded like I don't even have a speck of faith. It sounded like they don't have any faith at all, as Jesus was saying. He says, if you had only a speck of faith, you would move mulberry trees. In the Message it says sycamore trees. I'm not sure which one is bigger. I'm not sure it matters. I can't move either of them. I can't even move a passion vine and get it to flourish. You know what Jesus thinks of when he says a speck of faith? Maybe he's thinking at that moment of the woman. You remember the woman that came to him when she had been sick for many, many years, and she tried to get close to him, and she could hardly get to him because the crowds were around. But she said to herself, if only I could touch the hem of his garment, I would be made well. I would be made whole. That was a speck of faith. That's all she had. She came with confidence to her Lord. And the word confidence in the midst of that is the root for fides, for faithfulness. She was faithful with that little amount of faith that she had to reach out and say, this is all that I need. Or what about the centurion, who wasn't even a follower or a believer of Jesus? He wasn't even Jewish. But he came to Jesus and he said, if you would say the word, my servant would be healed. A speck of faith. Well, what is faith, after all? Faith, it turns out, is not about performing mighty acts. Mighty acts that move heaven and earth and change the course of eternity. Rather, they are the small, everyday things that we do that keep us grounded in our life. How many of you think about the things that you do every day as being acts of faith? Of looking out into the world and seeing what needs to be done, and then doing what needs to be done. It may just be the ordinary things. So many things that happen to us, that come to us in life, that go by unnoticed. We just go and do them. We don't even stop to think about that they have anything to do with our faith. Like showing up for work every day and doing a good job. That's faithfulness, right? Listening to somebody who needs somebody for you to talk to. Just the listening. That's faithfulness. Getting the kids off to school. I know there's people here who can relate to that, right? Sitting with someone in the cafeteria when it looks like they could use a friend. Volunteering at a local homeless shelter. Or maybe volunteering to Baskets of Hope on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock on Johnson Street at the place and time. That was a commercial. Commercial for faithfulness. Going out to vote even if you're discouraged about all the candidates who may be out there. Balancing the books for your business or community, or in Renee's case for her church. writing a thank you note to someone who has done a kindness. You know, every Friday night at the end of the week, Jimmy Fallon gets up there and he catches up and he writes his thank you notes. Have you ever watched him? And he writes thank you notes to not only people, actually to things and items, to all kinds of things. Acts of thankfulness. Cooking supper is an act of thankfulness. Praying for a neighbor who is having a hard time. What about cooking a meal for someone who's having a hard time? Our congregation has been out there helping Michelle in her time that she's been dealing with cancer to bring meals to their house. The list could go on. Martin Luther has an addition to the list. He extols the virtues of fathers who change their children's diapers. He says this: when a father goes ahead and washes diapers or performs some other menial task for his child, and someone ridicules him as an effeminate fool, God, with all his angels and creatures, is smiling. An act of faithfulness. Now, none of these are a big deal. And yet it is just these kinds of acts that occupy so much of our lives. And if we would only stop and realize that those are acts of faithfulness that most of us don't even think about. We're trying as a church to be faithful. And Don, I'm going to invite you to come and share with us for a moment about the experience that we had together this week when we went to Panther Run.
It'll take a little longer than normal.
Okay, well, you know when it's over. I've got more to say too. So.
Thanks to our sister Elmer, probably a month or two ago, she identified that her grandson was in school and was aware of a child that didn't have money for lunch and didn't have lunch. So, upon hearing her express that difficulty, I contacted the church council and said, hey, would it be okay if I explore this with the schools that are in our neighborhood? And I got permission to do that. And I contacted Panther Run, which is the closest school to here. It's on 172nd. I'm familiar with Everglades School in Weston. Very nice place. And I wasn't familiar with Panther Run. I have become more familiar because Nancy told me that Ken and her children went there, so I got a little more information. But I did contact Dr. Chacona, who was the assistant principal, and indicated that I wanted to get more information about the issue with lunches. And there is a subsidized program for lunch. In fact, all the children do get a free breakfast. But there are some who, for varying reasons, either don't qualify or their parents haven't gotten to completing the paperwork, whatever the case may be. So that in fact, yes, there are times when there is not lunch available for that child. They could get a cheese sandwich, but some of them probably wouldn't be too delighted with that. So I contacted Dr. Chacona and got that information, and I asked him if there was a way that we could, as a church, provide funds for that situation. And he said, well, I've got to figure out how we can do this. And then he got back to me and he said, yes, we can. And he said, if you would bring a check from the church and a letter indicating that its purpose and that they would monitor it. So that he also then, I said, well, are there other needs? Well, as it turns out, Panther Run has special needs children. And between the special needs children and other children, there are times when they need underwear and socks because of accidents during the day, and they've been getting some of those from Walmart and Walgreens, but it's a struggle for them to get them. So we agreed that we would try to do that, and we've got the list in the back that we will be providing those items and for how long hopefully they're needed. So now we get up to Pastor and I going up there the other day, and Dr. Chacona was going to be away, so we met with Principal Safe. And this is where Nancy was very helpful in me understanding. When I went on the website for that school, I saw pay it forward. Well, very nice. When I walked into that school, pay it forward just hit me in the face. This little smile button every time I talk about that school, I want to smile. Because evidently, Principal Safe was the assistant principal for a period of time. She's been in that school for 19 years and has become, of course, the principal. And from what Nancy says, this pay it forward has all exploded with her. I can't begin to recite to you all the different things that they do. I will tell you that there's a sister school over in West Hollywood that has a food pantry, and Panther Run helps to collect food for that food pantry over there. And then there are many other things they do. Principal Safe has her own lunch account. She usually brings her own lunch. The lunch account is if there's a child that doesn't have lunch. So we've been here going on close to 15 years. And thanks to Elma, and thanks to exploring that, we have a mission right there in our own backyard that has just been identified. And we've indicated to Principal Safe that if there are more things that we can be involved in and be helpful with, we certainly want to try to do that. So, Pastor, that's my update of this visit, because I was totally encouraged.
What it takes, right, to be faithful. These 2 cans here. Last week I had 6 cans in a pyramid up here. This morning, we talked about bringing in a can of food every week. This morning, Sari came in with her hands full and a big smile. Where do I put these, Pastor? Faithfulness. In these small things, in these small moments. Jim, you have been talking as our council president about making, what did you say you want to do in the community? Transform wasn't the word I was thinking of, but you said make an impact in the community. And a place and time and baskets of hope. And my new partner in crime, ministry, Pastor DJ, who's the Pentecostal pastor whose church is also out there, he's invited me to consider being part of what he wants to do called Project Impact for the community. Some things are happening. Some things are just getting ready to take off and to grow. And I invite you and encourage you to see what it means to be in faithfulness. I want to close with this little story of how we see faith. You know a mustard seed, you have a picture of it on the front cover. And if you think how small they are, you see there's a penny there that gives you a measurement tool. How small the penny is, and then how small a mustard seed is. And that's all the faith that we're told we need. But what does that faith mean? What does it actually entail? Well, here was a story. A preacher was preaching a sermon on this text, and at the end of the sermon, somebody came to him and said, let me tell you something about a group of people, some farmers and engineers in the early to mid-1900s were trying to develop a new way of getting the mustard oil out of the mustard plants. And so what they would do is they would take this plant, the mustard plant, they would pick it and put it through this processing machine that would squeeze it, that would juice it almost to get all the oils out. And then on the other end of that, they would have this pulp left over. Well, what to do with the pulp? So they took the pulp and they chopped it up. They shaped it. They formed it into what they call a cake. And then they baked it to dry it. You know what they did with those pulp cakes of mustard seed plants? They would feed those to the cattle. The cattle would then take those cakes, they would eat them, chew them. You know how cows are always chewing, right? And they have multiple stomachs, so it gets chewed again and again, and then goes into those stomachs, and the enzymes break it down until the inevitable happens. Do I have to explain this? It's called cow pies, right? I was hoping that Kevin would be here from Iowa, but Kathy, you know what cow pies are, right? So they would drop out the cow pies. Now there was a problem, because the farmers who were engaging in this experiment, in this processing, had an issue. Everywhere where a cow pie dropped, guess what happened? Mustard seed would grow. And so it's a sign of faith, because our faith can be tested and tried. It can be pressed down. It can be chopped up. It can be baked. It can be chewed on. It can be digested yet again. And it's still, the seed still does what it was designed to do, which is to grow a mustard seed plant. So my friends, when you are feeling pressed down and chewed up and ready to be spit out and digested, hold on to that seed of faith and let it germinate in your life and let it grow and let that faith touch somebody's life. Do it with a song as you meditate, as you're inspired to love and listen and learn and to have an excitement and an enthusiasm. And oh, by the way, it wouldn't hurt to smile. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.